The story of Esther is one of the most inspiring in the Bible. It's about a young Jewish woman who went from being a regular girl to becoming queen of Persia. Her bravery and faith saved her people from destruction, even when the odds were stacked against her. What's even more amazing is that God's name isn't mentioned once in her story, but you can still see His plan in everything that happens. Esther's life is a powerful example of courage, faith, and understanding that everything happens for a reason. Her story shows us how to face challenges with courage, how to lean on others for support, and how to trust that even when we can't see it, there's a bigger plan at work. These lessons aren't just from long ago, they're things we can all learn from today, especially when life gets tough or uncertain. But before we jump into these life lessons, I just want to say, I'm on a journey to reach 1,000 subscribers as a small channel. If you want to help me grow, please hit that subscribe button and support this channel. It would mean so much. Let's dive into the life lessons we can learn from Esther. Courage in the face of adversity. One of the most powerful lessons from Esther's story is her incredible courage in the face of danger. When her cousin Mordecai urged her to speak to King Ahasuerus to save the Jewish people, she faced a life-threatening decision. Back then, approaching the king without being summoned could result in death, even for the queen. It was a terrifying moment, and at first Esther hesitated. Who wouldn't? She knew the risks and understood that her life was on the line. But something changed within Esther. Mordecai's words hit her heart. Who knows? Maybe you were made queen for such a time as this. These words reminded her that her position and influence weren't accidental. Esther realized she had a purpose, and that gave her the strength to step forward. She decided to risk everything for the sake of her people, saying, "If I perish, I perish." Her courage wasn't reckless. It was thoughtful and purposeful. Before acting, she fasted and asked the Jewish people to join her in fasting and prayer. She didn't let fear hold her back, but faced the challenge with faith and determination. Esther teaches us that courage doesn't mean being fearless. It means acting, even when you're scared. It's about trusting that your actions can make a difference, no matter how overwhelming the situation feels. Her story reminds us that sometimes we're placed in difficult situations so we can rise to the occasion and fulfill our purpose. Embracing divine timing. Another key lesson from Esther's story is the importance of recognizing and trusting divine timing. When Mordecai encouraged Esther to approach King Ahasuerus, he told her something profound. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? This one statement shifted Esther's perspective. She began to see that her position as queen wasn't just a coincidence. It was part of a larger plan. Esther could have chosen to act immediately or recklessly, but instead, she waited for the right moment. Timing was everything. She didn't rush to the king in a panic. Instead, she fasted for 3 days and encouraged her people to do the same. This time of fasting and prayer allowed her to seek wisdom and prepare her heart for what was to come. When Esther finally approached the king, she didn't demand action right away. Instead, she carefully planned her request, inviting the king and Haman to a series of banquets before revealing her true purpose. Her patience and understanding of timing allowed the situation to unfold in a way that brought justice and salvation for her people. Esther's story reminds us that timing matters. Sometimes, we're so eager to act that we forget the importance of preparation and waiting for the right opportunity. By trusting in divine timing, we can align ourselves with a bigger plan that we might not fully understand in the moment. The power of fasting and prayer. One of the most striking parts of Esther's story is her reliance on fasting and prayer during a critical moment in her life. Before approaching King Ahasuerus to plead for her people, Esther didn't act impulsively. Instead, she called for a fast, asking all the Jewish people in the city of Susa to join her in fasting for 3 days and nights. She and her attendants fasted as well, seeking God's guidance and strength for the monumental task ahead. Fasting and prayer in Esther's story show us the importance of seeking spiritual support when we're faced with life's biggest challenges. It wasn't just about going without food, it was about humbling herself and relying on God's power rather than her own. Fasting allowed Esther to prepare mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for the daunting task of confronting the king. This moment also highlights the power of community. Esther didn't go through this alone. She rallied others to fast and pray with her, reminding us that unity and collective faith can make a difference. Her example teaches us that before taking a big step, we should pause, reflect, and seek guidance. It's a reminder that prayer and preparation are not signs of weakness, but of wisdom and strength. When we lean on faith, we can face even the most overwhelming circumstances with clarity and confidence, maintaining humility and grace. Esther's story stands out not only because of her courage, but also because of her humility and grace. Even after becoming queen, a position of immense power and privilege, she didn't let her status change who she was. She remained humble, respectful, and grounded, recognizing that her role wasn't just about her own comfort, but about serving others and fulfilling a greater purpose. When faced with the challenge of saving her people, Esther didn't rush in with demands or arrogance. Instead, she approached the situation with wisdom and grace. For example, when she went before King Ahasuerus uninvited, she didn't immediately make her request. Instead, she honored the king by inviting him and Haman to a banquet. This strategic and respectful approach earned her favor and set the stage for her ultimate appeal. Esther also showed humility in recognizing that she couldn't do it alone. By calling for fasting and prayer, she acknowledged her need for divine guidance and the support of her people. She didn't act out of pride or self-reliance, but leaned on her faith and the strength of her community. Her example teaches us the importance of staying humble, even when we're in positions of influence or power. True strength comes from approaching challenges with grace and considering how our actions affect others. Esther's humility allowed her to act wisely and effectively, making her a true example of servant leadership. Advocacy and intercession. One of the most powerful aspects of Esther's story is her role as an advocate for her people. When she learned of Haman's plan to destroy the Jewish people, Esther didn't stay silent or pretend it wasn't her problem. Instead, she chose to use her influence as queen to intercede on their behalf, even though it put her own life at great risk. Advocating for others often requires courage, and Esther showed this in every step of her journey. She understood that her position as queen gave her a unique opportunity to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Her advocacy wasn't just about speaking, it was about taking action and carefully planning how to make her case. By hosting the two banquets, Esther created the perfect opportunity to reveal Haman's evil plot to King Ahasuerus. What's remarkable is that Esther didn't only advocate for her people out of duty, she did it with deep compassion and a willingness to sacrifice her own safety. Her words and actions were not about herself, but about saving others. This teaches us an important lesson. When we have the opportunity to use our voice and position to help those in need, we should take it, even if it feels uncomfortable or risky. Esther's advocacy reminds us that one person's actions can make a difference. Her willingness to intercede not only saved the Jewish people, but also demonstrated the power of standing up against injustice with courage and faith. Wisdom in strategy. Esther's story is a perfect example of how wisdom and strategy can turn the tide in even the most dire situations. When Esther decided to approach King Ahasuerus to plead for the lives of her people, she didn't act impulsively or recklessly. Instead, she carefully thought through every step of her plan, understanding the importance of timing, preparation, and presentation. Rather than immediately making her request to the king, Esther first invited him and Haman to a banquet. This wasn't just a kind gesture, it was a strategic move. By honoring the king with an invitation, she ensured that he was in a favorable mood and willing to listen to her. During the first banquet, she didn't reveal her true intentions, but instead invited them to a second banquet. This built suspense, drew the king's attention, and created the perfect opportunity for her to make her case. Esther's approach shows the value of patience and careful planning. She didn't rush into the situation out of fear or panic. Instead, she took the time to consider how her actions would be received and ensured that she was fully prepared before making her request. This teaches us that achieving a goal often requires more than just determination. It requires thoughtfulness and strategy. By being patient, wise, and deliberate, Esther was able to save her people and expose Haman's wicked plans in a way that was both effective and impactful. Identity and faithfulness. Esther's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of staying true to your identity and faith, even in the face of adversity. Although she was living in a foreign land and had risen to the status of queen in a Persian court, Esther never forgot her roots as a Jewish woman. Her faith and identity were central to her actions, even when it would have been easier to remain silent and blend into her surroundings. When Mordecai told Esther about Haman's plot to destroy the Jewish people, she could have chosen to stay quiet and protect herself. After all, no one except Mordecai knew she was Jewish, and revealing her identity came with great personal risk. Yet Esther chose to embrace her heritage and stand with her people, knowing that doing so could cost her everything. Her decision teaches us that being true to who we are and to our values isn't always easy, especially when the stakes are high. But it's in those moments that our faith and integrity are tested the most. Esther understood that her identity wasn't something to hide or compromise on. It was a key part of her purpose. Her faithfulness to God and her people reminds us of the importance of standing firm in our beliefs, even when it's inconvenient or dangerous. Esther's courage to embrace her identity shows that staying true to ourselves can lead to great impact and the fulfillment of a greater purpose. The hidden hand of providence. One of the most fascinating aspects of the book of Esther is that God's name is never mentioned, not once, yet His presence and providence are felt in every twist and turn of the story. This unique feature of the book shows how God works behind the scenes, orchestrating events even when it's not obvious. Esther's life reminds us that even when we don't see or hear God directly, He's still at work in ways we might not immediately understand. From Esther's rise to queen, to Mordecai overhearing the plot against the king, to the timing of Haman's downfall, everything in the story fits together in a way that seems too perfect to be coincidence. It's clear that God's hand was guiding each event to ensure the deliverance of His people. This underscores the idea that God's providence doesn't always look dramatic or miraculous. Sometimes it's subtle, working through everyday decisions and circumstances. For many of us, it can be hard to trust in a plan we can't see. We may wonder if things are happening randomly, or if there's any meaning in the challenges we face. Esther's story reassures us that even when life feels chaotic, there's a purpose and a plan unfolding. It teaches us to trust that God is working behind the scenes, aligning events for a greater good, even if we don't understand it right now. Unity and community support. Esther's story highlights the incredible power of unity and community support in times of crisis. When Esther decided to take the bold step of approaching the king to plead for her people, she didn't do it alone. She asked all the Jewish people in Susa to fast and pray with her for 3 days. This wasn't just a personal journey for Esther. It was a collective effort that brought her community together in faith and solidarity. By calling on her people to fast and pray, Esther showed the importance of leaning on others for spiritual and emotional support. This act of unity wasn't just about physical fasting. It was a declaration of shared faith and dependence on God. Knowing that others were fasting and praying alongside her gave Esther the strength and courage to face the king, despite the risks. The story reminds us that we're not meant to face life's challenges alone. When we come together with others, whether it's through prayer, shared action, or mutual encouragement, we can find strength and support that we wouldn't have on our own. Esther's example also shows the power of collective faith, as the Jewish community's united efforts played a crucial role in their deliverance. In today's world, this lesson is just as important. Whether it's through family, friends, or faith communities, finding support and unity can help us face even the most overwhelming challenges with strength and hope. Overcoming fear. Esther's story is one of the greatest examples of overcoming fear in the Bible. When her cousin Mordecai asked her to approach King Ahasuerus to save the Jewish people, Esther's initial reaction was hesitation. She knew the risks. Approaching the king without being summoned could result in death, and she wasn't guaranteed a positive outcome. It's natural to feel afraid when faced with such a daunting situation, and Esther's fear was very real. However, instead of letting fear paralyze her, Esther confronted it head-on. Mordecai's reminder that she might have been placed in her royal position for such a time as this gave her the perspective she needed. She realized that her fear couldn't outweigh her purpose. Her willingness to say, "If I perish, I perish," is a powerful declaration of faith over fear. Esther's courage wasn't about feeling fearless. It was about choosing to act in spite of her fear. She took practical steps to face the challenge, such as fasting and praying for guidance, which gave her the strength to move forward. Her story teaches us that fear is a natural part of life, but it doesn't have to control us. When we trust in a greater purpose and take steps to prepare ourselves, we can overcome even our deepest fears. Esther's bravery shows that when we face our fears with faith, we can accomplish things we never thought possible. The story of Esther is more than just a historical account. It's a blueprint for living a life of courage, faith, and purpose. From her bravery in facing the king, to her reliance on fasting and prayer, to her wisdom in planning, Esther's life offers lessons that remain relevant for us today. Her ability to stay humble, advocate for her people, and trust in God's unseen plan reminds us that we, too, can make a difference when we step into the roles we're called to fulfill. Esther's story teaches us that we don't have to be extraordinary to have an extraordinary impact. Whether we're facing fears, standing up for what's right, or waiting for the right time to act, her life shows us that trust in a higher purpose can guide us through even the most difficult situations. As you reflect on Esther's lessons, remember that you have a unique purpose too. Just like Esther, you might be in your position for such a time as this. Trust in the process, lean on your community, and don't let fear stop you from doing what's right. If this inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help me on my journey to reach 1,000 subscribers. Let's continue learning and growing together.